Hello class, welcome to week 3. Sorry about the technical difficulties we experienced getting this lecture uploaded. Today I'm going to be talking a little bit more about Alzheimer's disease and dementia. But first I want to just kind of touch on your reading. Chapter 3 was about physiological and biological processes of aging. So there are certain systems in the body that we expect to change more so than others as we age. For example, oh, sorry, my dog is chewing on a buffalo horn. For example, our eyesight weakens, our hearing gets weaker, our metabolism slows, and our muscle density is expected to decrease. Some of the charts in your book are really helpful. The one about the swimming times I thought was interesting. The world's best swimmer at age 20 is going to be nowhere near the world's best swimmer at age 70. And that's not to belittle either age group. There's just certain factors in human aging that will take place and affect our later years and our physical development. And then chapter 4 kind of covers repercussions of aging, like how do people cope with it? What are mental and emotional ways that people cope with some of the gains and losses that they experience while aging? It also touches heavily on Alzheimer's disease coping. And of course, chapter 3 talks about Alzheimer's and dementia as well. So my job is a care coordinator for a geriatric care management company. So what I do is I work with families every day, and a lot of my families and clients do have dementia. And I speak up as their advocate in the healthcare system, in day-to-day care. I fill gaps in their care routines. But to use today as an example, I have a patient with with dementia. She doesn't have Alzheimer's disease. She has dementia. Different form. I believe she has vascular dementia. And this particular woman is usually pretty feisty. She was in a good mood today. However, she had a doctor appointment, and the whole time the doctor was using sarcasm to communicate with her. And because of the dementia, this woman is not able to process sarcasm anymore. So as you can imagine, this doctor appointment was just long and frustrating for everyone. Not to mention the fact that dementia patients can't recall basic information due to the memory loss. So the doctor would say, "What symptoms are you having?" She would say, "I don't know." And that's when I would cite the logs from her caregivers. So as you can see, dementia is a really intricate and complicated disease. For those of you who've been willing to share that you have a loved one with dementia, first of all, I'm sorry that that's just tough. There's no way around it. Prayers for you. It's hard on the family and it's hard on the patient. And for those of you looking to go into the older adult field, it's going to be a huge component of what you do because most of the need for care and management is going to be with Alzheimer's or other dementias. So kind of to start off the lecture, Alzheimer's or other dementias, what does that mean? Well, Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia. As your book will explain some of the statistics, it is the most common type of dementia. Alzheimer's disease usually is diagnosed in early to moderate stage, and after diagnosis, the average length of time before someone passes away is about 7 years. I've seen people live under a year with the diagnosis. I saw one woman live 18 years post Alzheimer's diagnosis. So it's all over the board, but 7 years is the average. Now, Alzheimer's disease is a type of dementia, just like an apple is a type of a fruit. All apples are fruit, but not all fruit are apples. Alzheimer's disease is just one of many forms of dementia, including vascular dementia, Lewy body dementia, Parkinson's-related dementia. There's even one that I don't think your book mentions, it's alcohol dementia. Chronic alcohol abuse can actually cause a specific type of dementia. So for those of you of age, drink in moderation, just one of the many reasons to not abuse alcohol, because that's really sad. That's the only form of dementia that is preventable 100% is alcohol related. But anyway, we won't get too far into that. So dementia is a brain disease. Essentially, it causes the brain to shrink. When I teach to families when they have a loved one diagnosed with dementia, I use the interstate analogy. So if you imagine the brain is a system of interstates and highways, and the cells in your brain are firing off electric signals. That's how they communicate with each other. In this interstate analogy, this information going to and from different parts of the brain are cars that are on the interstate. So in a healthy brain, the cars are driving freely across the interstate, the information gets from point A to point B. In a person with a type of dementia, it's essentially like roadblocks or traffic cones are getting set up along the way so that the cars can no longer get from point A to point B. As the disease advances, it would be like putting more and more traffic cones on a busy highway. Eventually, the information stops flowing altogether. Early stage dementias are often characterized by just odd behaviors, forgetting things that should be known. Whereas moderate stage, you're going to see more struggling to care for themselves. You'll see people struggle with hygiene a lot, eating food that's outdated or inappropriate. For example, they may eat a large meal and then an hour later eat another large meal because they forgot they ate the first large meal, all kinds of things. And then in the late stages of dementia, you typically see people who are unable to communicate. Their language is typically reduced to a few words. They can communicate with body language, but they can't with speech. They need assistance in all activities of daily living, so they need assistance bathing, dressing, feeding, taking care of themselves. Which is part of what makes this disease so tragic, especially for families. It's really hard to watch a loved one decline slowly over time. That's why it's called the long goodbye. Dementia is progressive, which means that it will get worse, not better. Which I've seen, sometimes people will have a really good day and the family kind of almost takes it as a false hope that their loved one is going to recover. Dementia is always progressive. Now, as your book says, there are certain types of cognitive impairment that are temporary or acute, such as delirium. For example, if somebody gets very dehydrated or is hypothermic, they may exhibit dementia-like behavior, but this is not the same thing as dementia as a disease. So, starting off with some of the dementias, Alzheimer's, we talked a little bit about. It's a result of the plaques building up in the brain. So in the brain cells, the plaque builds up, the information can't get anywhere, the neuron cells kind of die off. In vascular dementia, it's typically related to chronic heart problems or problems with blood vessels in the brain. With vascular dementia, you're going to see a lot more mini strokes typically. Vascular dementia can produce a lot of really aggressive behaviors, which is difficult to care for. And then I'll talk a little bit Lewy body dementia. Those are the three most common types of dementia: Alzheimer's, vascular, and Lewy body. Lewy body dementia is a result of proteins that build up in the brain, thus restricting the information getting from one point to another. And Lewy body dementia is notorious for causing hallucinations. One thing you see very often with Lewy body dementia are really frightening. I had one woman who believed like this was a hallucination. She would see this every day. Her younger brother was trapped under a piece of farm equipment, and this poor woman was just in hysterics all the time because that's what her hallucination was. And to patients with vascular dementia, it's very real. One thing you'll find with any type of dementia across the board is that the industry standard is not to correct them because the brain loses its ability to reason and see logic as dementia takes hold. So for a person with dementia, I could say this calendar is blue. You and I can clearly see that this is a blue little calendar book. If a person with dementia thinks this is red, I'm not going to fight them on it because their brain can't get over the fact that they're incorrect. They're correct, and if I say they're not correct, I become the bad guy. Dementia takes away a person's ability to use reason and logic the same way a healthy person does. And quite often when people with dementia become frustrated, they don't have the ability to communicate that they're frustrated. And that's why we see some of the typical behaviors associated with dementia. Things like wandering, sundowning, which is a increase in agitation in the evening hours. We see things like lashing out at family members or caregivers. And it's another reason why this disease is devastating. It takes a person almost backwards through the developmental stages. Now that being said, people with dementia are still adults. One of my biggest pet peeves is when people patronize the elderly, or talk to them in a baby voice, or talk to them like they're unintelligent. That's not what's going on. They're an adult with a brain disease, and they should be talked to like an adult. The best success tools that I have with dementia are don't argue, try to put yourself in their world, try to understand things from where they're coming from. And even if that means, being very vague. For example, I had a woman who believed it was Christmas in July, and for whatever reason, it was Christmas, and she was panicking because nothing was decorated, nothing was set up. And a lot of people were saying it's not Christmas, it's July. And that did nothing to comfort this woman because in her brain it's Christmas and her brain doesn't have the ability to see anything else. So what you could do in a situation like that is talk to the woman about Christmas. We'll say, well, what do you like to do for Christmas? What do you like to bake? What do you like to put on your Christmas tree? Address their concerns and their fears, even if you don't directly answer them. Because all she needed to know was that people cared that it was Christmas, even though it clearly wasn't Christmas. Another thing that I say when you're working with dementia is keep it simple, and I don't mean that in a rude way at all. People with dementia don't have the ability to process a lot of information at one time. So whereas you and I could hear background noise and trying to write down a sentence and watch TV at the same time, that doesn't work for a person with dementia. So if you come into their room, let's say their name is Marge, you say, "Hi Marge, I'm Caitlin. I'm gonna be giving you a questionnaire today. How are you? Look at the birds outside. It's already March 15th. Marge is gonna have no clue. Marge is just gonna shut down because her brain can't process all that rapid fire. So what you would say is, "Hi Marge, my name is Caitlin. I'm here to visit with you today." Whatever. Do you like spring? Try to keep it one topic, one question at a time, and give people time because their brain has to sort through so much more than a healthy brain does. So never rush a person with dementia. And don't necessarily change the information, just break it down. It's kind of like the analogy taking a bite out of an elephant, if you will. You don't have to rush it, just tackle it one bit at a time. And I also say with dementia, sometimes it helps to kind of narrow the focus too. So if there is background noise, like a TV or a radio, go somewhere quiet or eliminate the background noise altogether. And as far as dementia behaviors go, oftentimes when there's an inappropriate behavior, it's because there's an unmet need. Is the person hungry? Do they have to go to the bathroom? Are they uncomfortable in their clothing? There's a million different reasons why they could be exhibiting troublesome behaviors. We just have to dig deeper as caregivers, and that's part of the big challenge. So anyway, to sum up, sort of Alzheimer's and dementia, not the same thing. Alzheimer's is a type of dementia. We talked a little bit about the stages of dementia and a little bit about the care of dementia and Alzheimer's. So this week, as you're reading the text, I want you to just be thinking in your line of work, if you encounter someone with Alzheimer's or dementia, how would you work with them? How would they come into play? Maybe if you're going to be a teacher, maybe you would have a student with a grandparent who has this disease. Maybe if you're going into the parish, you would have people in your congregation who have this disease. What are the best ways we can care for these people? There are a lot of interesting debates going on right now in the geriatrics field about some of the ethical concerns with dementia. For example, at what point do we take away a driver's license? Clearly, a person with dementia is not safe on the road. But at what point do we draw that line? Or, as professionals, many of you may be familiar with the HIPAA law. It stands for Health Information Protection Accountability Act. And what HIPAA does is it makes it illegal for anybody to share private healthcare information about another person. So, for example, if a man named John Smith lives in a nursing home, the staff at the nursing home cannot talk about John Smith's health information with anyone else but John's doctors. So if a neighbor came up, in the store and said, "Well, how's John Smith?" The person could say, "He's fine. Why don't you go visit him?" They couldn't say, he has diabetes. They couldn't say he has heart problems. None of that can be shared. So when it comes to dementia care, you often have people like me who are going to these doctor's visits and coordinating this information. And I will try to get a doctor to communicate with another doctor or a doctor to communicate with a family member. And I hit a brick wall because of HIPAA. And if I don't have a HIPAA release form in my hand faxed over to that doctor's office, they can't talk to me about the patient. So, I mean, there have been ethical debates about, do we alter HIPAA regulations for dementia care? Just all kinds of questions. There are lots of different approaches to care too. 30 years ago, maybe less time than that, but I know about 30 years ago, it was industry standard to what's to do what's called reorientation. My computer's spazzed out there, which would mean if a person thinks today is Tuesday. So let's say a person with dementia insists that today is Saturday. Saturday. No, John Smith, it's Tuesday. John Smith would just get irritated because in John's mind it's Saturday. Now the industry standard, there is a popular one now, it's called best friends approach. The idea is to put yourself in the moment with the patient and really focus on sensory experiences. People suffering from even late stage dementia can still benefit from things like music, a gentle hand massage, just to know there's a presence there. So even if a person has really far advanced dementia, you can still make everything more therapeutic for them if you use their five senses. For example, instead of just helping Mr. Smith take a shower, maybe the staff could find a scent that Mr. Smith really likes and have that going to kind of stimulate his sensory input. In fact, one of the most popular one of the most popular interventions for bad dementia behaviors are called snozzling rooms. They're rooms that are designed specifically for memory care, and they are very quiet rooms with some ambient noise, like something like water falling or the wind, just very ambient noise. They may have a projection of something simple on the wall, like maybe fish going in a tank. And they have different objects that you can work with the person. So they may have a soft object or a round object or a fibrous object. And the point is to use the five senses to stimulate a person with Alzheimer's or dementia. Half the time when they're sundowning or wandering, they're just bored because, maybe they can't play checkers anymore. Maybe they can't go golfing anymore. That's what they did for 50 years. Well, now we can take them to these snozzling rooms and sit down with them, and they can listen to the sounds and hold whatever object, and it brings them a lot of comfort and stimulation. So with Alzheimer's and dementia, it really is all about the approach. Now, I could go on for probably a good 2 hours, but I won't. I'm surprised I've kept it this short. I work so much with Alzheimer's and dementia. If you have any questions or think that maybe this is a field where you would be interested in, let me know. I guarantee you that there are memory care units that would love a volunteer. Maybe if you want to see if memory care is the right road for you, or even just a nursing home or skilled nursing facility in general. Maybe spend some volunteer time there and see if that's a field you want to explore more, or volunteer for a hospice agency. There are a number of ways to kind of start getting experience, because it's very hard to jump in cold with Alzheimer's and dementia. It can absolutely be learned, but there's definitely some practice involved. For example, one of the other techniques we use is called redirection. Maybe some of you have heard of it. When a person with Alzheimer's or dementia becomes frustrated or is doing something inappropriate, for example, Alzheimer's or other dementias make it pretty common for people to say sexually inappropriate things, or especially with women, touch them in sexually inappropriate places. So in the industry, one of the ways we help with this behavior is we just distract them or redirect them. For example, I had one gentleman who was getting handsy in the shower. He was touching female workers in an inappropriate way. So we just gave him a big, colorful loofah sponge to hold in the shower. He just needed something to keep his hands busy, and he didn't bother the staff anymore. It's all in the approach, but anyway, I don't quite remember where I was going with that. Like I said, I could go for days on Alzheimer's and dementia. If you want more information, that's where I was going. You can set up a Skype appointment or shoot me an email. I do this every day. And if you're interested, try volunteering, see if it's the right calling for you. It really is a very special group of people and a really special calling. Just like any vocation, you never want to take it lightly, but I always recommend giving it a try. So, all that being said, as far as week 3 goes. We're already halfway through the course. These things really do fly by. You've got some, make sure you're looking at your final project and letting me know if there are any questions there, because seriously, that's going to be here before you know it. You've got, I believe you had a quiz and some essays that I'm getting to grading. You have an essay this week, 2 discussion posts, maybe something else. I'd have to look at Blackboard again, but you know how to look at Blackboard. You're all smart. So far, very good job on the discussion posts. Good job taking information and applying it and then using critical thinking. I'm very happy overall with what I'm seeing. So please keep up the good work. I'm looking forward to week 3. Again, if there are questions, let me know, especially on this unit because this is kind of my area. But otherwise, have a wonderful rest of your week. Have a wonderful Palm Sunday. Yeah, that's already almost here. What? And sorry for the chewing noise. My little buddy here decided to get playful. Although on this note, people with Alzheimer's and dementia, one thing they do benefit from is pet therapy extensively, because people with Alzheimer's and dementia tend to revert back. So they might not recognize their grandchildren, but they would recognize a friend from 60 years ago. And one of the things most people remember are animals, whether or not they grew up on a farm in the city. So, I mean, this little guy could really bring a lot of comfort to someone with Alzheimer's and dementia. And he clearly wants to get down. That brought me to another quick point. As you'll see, usually when I do these lectures, I go a little bit off the cusp because I think that true candid discussion is a good lecture format for these sociology and psychology disciplines because, you know, you guys can read text on your own. You're smart enough to do that. But this is just me talking about my experiences in the field, my case studies, if you will. Reverting. So, you know, one of the things that drives me crazy is the media depictions of Alzheimer's and dementia sometimes because they're so wildly inaccurate. One example coming to my mind, and this is not to bash any in particular author or book, or if you're a fan of it, that's fine, but is The Notebook. In this movie, Allie and Noah are dancing, and there's a scene where they're dancing, and it's really sweet, and then all of a sudden she doesn't recognize Noah anymore and calls for a nurse. Now, this would be very unlikely because if Allie wouldn't remember her husband of however many years, she wouldn't remember that she's in a facility and have the presence of mind to call a nurse. Short-term memory is the first thing to go. So a person basically loses the ability to convert experiences into memories. And that's why you see people forgetting their grandkids, but not forgetting their high school. And I mean, a lot of people in their maybe 50s and 60s in my parents' age group, they've misplaced their keys or something and they worry that they're developing Alzheimer's disease. Well, the main things to look for in developing any form of dementia are the inability to process the new. So for example, things like misplacing an item or forgetting an appointment or forgetting a new friend's name. Like if you meet somebody once and don't remember their name the next time, that's not Alzheimer's disease. That's just normal human forgetfulness. Or, you know, sometimes people just have bad days. People have mood swings. That's normal. What would be abnormal would be forgetting the name of your best friend for 10 years. Forgetting directions to the bank you've gone to for 10 years. Things like forgetting the names of relatives that you see at least, you know, a couple times a year. And then drastic personality changes. If you've always known your grandma to be a happy-go-lucky person, and then suddenly she has very depressed mood and is anxious and irritable and aggressive, something's going on. Whether or not it's dementia or maybe it's some other health concern, something's going on. That's a red flag. Or things like placing objects where it makes no sense. I had one gentleman who had put his remote control in the shower. Like those types of things. That doesn't make any sense. That's not misplacing the remote. That's why is the remote in the shower, or why is the watch in the refrigerator, or all those weird types of things. Those are the more red flag indicators. Because when the brain loses the ability to process new experiences into memories, that's when you start to see lapses in the day-to-day routine. So just kind of some bit on distinguishment there, an excuse to introduce you to my dog, and a wrap up to this lecture. I promise this time I'm officially done. So anyway, have a wonderful week 3. I look forward to the rest of the class, and as always, you know how to reach me. Thank you.